sell you for the price, it's institutional use, it's cut and dry. Anyways, I'm voting no, but that's all I need to say.
Yeah, I'll just say any additional user to that site, I would think would be considered substantial. The plan commission would be the person that would be asked to do that. But yeah, if all of a sudden there's another user on a village complex PED, I think that would warrant additional review. That's all I can really add to that, but.
Commissioner Klein, did you have something to say?
Go ahead.
Think through my question.
To President Rozak's point about, you know, different zoning maybe generating a different sale price. I have not read whatever the agreement was that the village has with the fire department. So is there anything in there that says if they add a paying tenant to a part of the building that they're not using, that then that they owe additional money to the village? I mean, no matter what they do with that unused space, is the sale price going to just, it is what it is, and that's it? I mean, it's not going to be negotiated or?
The memorandum of understanding has parameters that speaks to if the property is not used for the principal use of a fire station, but that requires review by the village.
Right.
If they're, from my understanding, and based upon the way that the building is proposed to be renovated, there will not be allowed to have a tenant on the first floor because there is not, and John, you can speak to this as well, but it would require the building to have an elevator installed, which is not accommodated for right now within the structure. So in the attic, while the attic or the second floor will be unutilized or white boxed for lack of a better term, it will also be not code compliant for a user, which would then also leave the basement for potential storage capabilities. In the area of the basement, it's not being renovated as such that it would be habitable use by another, or I would suspect code compliant at that point as well. So the fire department has only verbalized the use to use that first floor for purposes of maintaining the existing walls and portions of that building, and has only sought to maximize that internal first floor use for purposes of keeping the character.
Which we saw. Yeah,
oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
One last question. If it's zoned institutional and the land burns down and the building burns down, they come back and they want to build, they want to sell it and build a mixed-use building or something, it would come back to the plan commission and the board because it would be a zoning change from institutional. Is that correct?
Well, a part of that, and I don't mean to speak ahead of Attorney Bayer, because he's currently working with NSFD on what we've been referring to as the facade easement, but what I believe they'll be recommending as a deed or covenant that runs with the land. That document will actually be the one that determines what the process would be for any contemplated, from my understanding,
okay,
any new construction occurring in the building, which would require village board approval.
Well, if the fire station burned down, I think we have bigger problems.
All that can be built without board authority somewhere is institutional. If it's zoned PED and it burns down and it's built and it meets some society that we haven't seen, standards, then, but we're still going to sell it for residential, you can do that with PDD with land commission approval.
No, that I would argue that would be a substantial modification that would require both plan commission and board approval.
Why? It's because the use of PDD specifies it has to be institutional?
Correct. The PDD, yes, the current PDD is for a village complex, which includes municipal uses, as well as a development plan that shows a firehouse. If anything beyond that would change, I think the plan commission would determine it to be a substantial change that would require a complete re-review as a new PDD.
Thank you. If I could just offer a little bit of historical context that might help. the PDD was created, and this is on page 15 of 47 in the packet. There's a little map in the right side there. In conjunction with the development of the library and the health department offices and the other things that went into that. So what they did is they created, the village saw fit to create this PDD that included the fire station, the village hall, and then that library and those office spaces that are attached there too. So,
Because we have, yeah. It's a complex, right? It's one developer developing a bunch of things on their property.
well, some of this was pre-existing. I mean, the village hall was already there and the fire station was there.
Yeah.
But the plan, the PDD basically talks and contemplates a municipal complex that encompasses those things. So the village did that on purpose. They included all of that area, the fire station, the village hall, the library offices, all together. And as long as these items stay part of the PPD, as long as that fire station stays there as part of that PDD, there will never be an opportunity to do anything different with that other than to continue it as a municipal building or fire station without getting express permission from the village to do something or anything different that would be inconsistent with that PDD. The only reason that it's coming before the Planning Commission today is as part of the redevelopment to facilitate the plan that the village is attempting to enter into with the North Shore Fire Department. There is some changes, landscaping changes, there's going to be a pedestrian walkway, help me out, Bart, there was one more, I think.
The removal of the garage and the addition of a bay.
The removal of the garage and the addition of the bay. And because of that, because the PDD is so tight, because of that, you're right, there's flexibility at the front end, you're developing it, but then once it's there, to change anything within that PDD is difficult. And so basically they're just coming saying, hey look, we're part of this PDD, we're still a fire station, we're still all these things, but we're removing the garage and we're putting this pedestrian walkway in and some of these other landscaping items for beautification. We're coming to you, to the Planning Commission, to say, is that consistent or inconsistent with the original PDD? If it's, you know, if they were...
I understand that, but we're chopping the parcel off. It's not one property anymore. We're creating a new CSM net. We're doing it in different order. We're not doing it all at one time. We're creating a CSM, and we're selling it. And so, if you just look at the book as a planner, what should the zoning be? If we're a different parcel and it's for a specific use, it should be institutional. I understand it's part of our complex, but it used to be our police station.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is institutional. I mean, no, it can't be messed with or tampered or changed or the use altered in any way without the express written permission of the village.
It's just better for citizens to understand when they come before you for a zoning change from institutional to mixed use than it is to go from a PDD to a PDD amendment. Nobody understands that. So if you understand where I'm coming from, the land price was lower based on what I thought was going to be rezoned to institutional. But the zoning is clean. We're breaking it off into its own parcel. What's the downfall of zoning as institutional?
I just have one point of clarification. So the current planned development district is more than one parcel. So it's the fire station and village hall are in one parcel, the library is a different parcel, and the parking lot's a third parcel. So it is common for development districts to have more than one parcel within it. So in terms of that, I don't see any issues with splitting it off, but that's the next item for consideration, I suppose.
And this might be a question for Attorney Baker. I mean, the Roundy's project that was approved in 2014, it's 3 separate parcels within one PDD. And shortly after the construction was finished, the developer sold off 2 of those 3 parcels, the Metro Market and the parking structure. But those didn't get rezoned into another, out of the PDD. They remained within that original PDD. Is that correct?
I have to check to give you a definitive answer. I hate to guess. I don't know if you have any.
No,
I mean, I don't remember any of those kind of conversations.
That is correct, because the uses did not change. So the parking structure
It's just
still
a
remains,
whole
and it's still
Didn't
mixed
change
use.
either of the land. I mean, it's still mixed use. They were selling it for the same. The value was never going to get greater.
Well, isn't this the same thing? I mean, just the the ownership is changed, the use is the same. That's the closest kind of comparison I could think of, is that you've got 3 separate parcels within a PDD, the ownership of 2 of the 3 changed, and that was it.
So it sounds like a jump in here. It sounds like the outcome doesn't matter whether it's zoned PDD or institutional. It's just easier to explain to the village what we're doing with the zoning.
I would argue that the outcome is, in essence, the same, but it's a rezoning of the property, and from a staff perspective, isn't necessary.
Is it more work?
Yes.
What for? A public hearing?
If you get
I
a
don't,
survey,
it obtains the same outcome with the use of a fire station.
yeah.
It would be a mapping change that would require, yes, we would need to hire, we would need to do a mapping change with that. There'd be a public hearing, there'd be multiple publications with it.
There's just a preference being voiced from one to do it a different way.
So,
It may make a difference in the
Never
control
tried
you have over the
changing, it'd be a
property as
public
well.
hearing, it'd be a notice,
Sorry,
it would be a
President Rosa, hang on, sorry. say that.
I was just saying that it may make a difference in the control that you have over the property as well as the village. You may, if the zoning change is made and there's a use that's consistent with the new zoning that is beyond your control, you may not be able to change that. So I think that there was, my understanding is there was some consideration of the amount of control that was had in a PDD versus perhaps some loss of control if it was something else, but I don't want to overspeak.
No, Fred, my argument has been that the PDD is actually, it's flexible until it gets approved. Once it's approved, it's very difficult to change. And so, to me, the plan development district, keeping the plan development district had more control in terms of what the village could approve there. That's just my perspective, but that's how I've seen this from the beginning of, the conversations.
So anything else other than the use of a fire station becomes very challenging to become approved by just a simple amendment to a PDD, but would require not only the planning commission, but also village board approval.
Yep.
well, that's a good thing.
That's a positive thing for the village.
Great. And then on the certified survey map that shows the easements, when that comes before the board for approval, is that when the facade easement saying, these exterior features must be maintained in the future, is that when that gets approved by the board and attached to that, or is that a whole another kind of easement?
I believe it's a whole other.
It's a different, yeah.
That's it, that would be
Okay.
a different, it would not be
All right.
the CSM.
Yep.
There's not a significantly, there's not a lot of competition for NSFD, which is one of the reasons why they actually exist as a consolidated department at this point in time. We don't have competition of other fire departments wanting to expand into our area.
Milwaukee's not.
Right, Milwaukee's not knocking at our door, so it's a bit more unique than a
And can I just say one thing to Scotty, why people are probably thinking I'm crazy over here? At last Monday, when we had the presentation, there was not agreement between the board, the village manager, and the fire department on what the siding was going to be. And so I have a really hard time, now that this goes just to the planning commission, and then we get to give CSM next, and we don't get to see the facade easement. These are the only things we approve. And I don't want to be in a position, I stated it then, to have to go to the community and say, we're in a rush, they need to build this in September, or whatever the date is, and we're not in agreement on this facade easement. I don't understand, the ideal situation, since we're in such a rush, is to have had the three together so everyone can see them. Doesn't mean all the boards have to approve each one, but it makes sense that we know what we're approving as the totality.
And President Rosick, I can understand that perspective. It was not initially contemplated to bring that document to the Planning Commission because they were not an approving authority. I would anticipate that the board, nothing has been rushed, this timeline has been verbalized and communicated on a number of occasions.
And I objected every time. I've objected. It's not like it's the first time you've heard this, how much more?
And I couldn't hear the rest of it.
This is the fourth time.
I don't recall this being the fourth time. I know that you've been anxious to review the facade document, and at the last meeting of which this timeline was discussed, it was noted at that time that it would be coming back to the village board for the village board's
There's a
review.
land sale. I don't know if you were around back then. Yes, I think you were.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear her. Could you please repeat?
Do you repeat what you said? President?
Yeah, I just said, I even said it back when you were doing the land sale.
We haven't sold any property at this point in time.
I said we're agreeing on the price. I understand that.
So, just trying to move forward here, lots of pieces of things. So we have a MOU on the sale, so there's a price.
We have an MOU that sets aside a process in motion. So what we're doing here tonight, and the next group to review these plans and sets would be the plan, or the design review board, which would be this Thursday.
Building changes.
Correct. And then this project in essence goes to the village board with what we're referring to as the facade easement, but will be called some other legal form by the time we get there. And then the village board has an opportunity to review that in conjunction with the North Shore Fire Department, who as well needs to agree upon that document. And then any approvals are subject to close of the property. The property and all the plans and specifications that are being, here in front of you in your packet will then be put out to bid. And the memorandum of understanding says that if the project comes in at estimated 4.1 million, I think it's 4.12 million, we shall proceed then immediately to close. If we are above that.
Close immediately.
Correct. And then, however, we can't do that unless there's agreement on the facade easement, and both the North Shore Fire Board and the village board both agree.
Yeah.
Hold on, President.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't hear her.
That's fine.
Okay. So if we are over the $4.12 budget, then both NSFD and the village board need to come to an alternative agreement.
As far as the price? Or any aspect?
Any aspect of the project. Would you concur, Chief?
Okay. So this step is,
This step is necessary to confirm that the new plan is agreeable to the planning commission, so the modified garage layout and then the pedestrian in between.
so I think, I don't know if we've had, can we have that discussion? And step into the zoning after that? Is this plan?
That is the zoning discussion. So the plan development district approves a development plan. That development plan that's being presented includes those three modifications.
The design, it approves design?
No, it approves the development plan. So the footprint of the building, the setbacks, things like that, that's what zoning approves. The architectural design is the design review board, and that's coming up this Thursday.
That's the facade.
And will they have the side easement by then?
I don't believe so, but they also do not review facade easements. They review, the plans. That plan can't get built unless there's approval, to get permits and things moving forward. So it will require the facade easement or whatever it's being called to be initiated before any changes happen, but they don't need to see that before they can approve whether or not what is submitted meets their expectations.
So,
There's no,
so if this moves forward to DRB, they approve the design, just trying to map this out in my mind, and then the board will see the facade easement, and if there is something in the facade easement that's been approved, but the board does not approve, I guess what happens at that point?
They wouldn't be able to get permits for the building. So if the facade easement says it must do this and the current plans say it does this, we would not issue permits until those two cleaned up.
Okay, and then the exterior views that we've seen on the architectural plans that I believe you were presented to the board showed the, to get the initial approval for moving the side door. I'm assuming all of that design work was done with some sort of facade easement. I don't know, idea, I mean, I just want to make sure, hang on 1 second, President Rozak, hang on. I just want to make sure that, I guess, and I think what everybody's sort of fear and concern is that we're going to get so far along and then see the facade easement, and what if there's something that is missing or added that was not intended to be taken away or added? Does that make sense? Like,
Or not, like not preserved, like.
Right, that's,
Like a stairwell.
right, like what if,
But I would expect the board wouldn't approve the easement then if it's missing that.
right, and that, so that's sort of my question. So if, if something's missing, or if something has, that was to be preserved was, added, or whatever that may be, what is our recourse at that point, I guess, is the only thing for the board just to not approve the easement? And then what? Like,
And then if there's any modifications in the future, then they use the easement, but we can't do shit once we say okay. So my point was, why can't we talk about the design elements first? So before this design review board, before we discuss the zoning, so we can see what we're agreeing as a board, and then let the other bodies take action. So they at least have some plan. Otherwise, we're going to have the facade easement for the future.
Becky mentioned that this discussion about keeping it in the PDD may have been had 3 or 4 times already. Was this discussion within a full board committee meeting, and or maybe just between you and President Rozak? I'm just wondering, what's the consensus of the board? Are they
We forwarded our standards to the North Shore Fire Department. We instructed the village manager to do so. Last time I talked to the chief, which was the last meeting, when we talked about exactly what you're looking at, he said, well, I don't remember, let me look and see if I saw that. And the village manager kind of said, well, I'm not sure that's the type of study that we were thinking about. So we're not in agreement until I know that we have some sort of general understanding. I don't know what we're talking about.
My question was relating to approving this zoning as just an amendment to the existing PDD versus a whole new zoning for institutional or whatever appropriate zoning there might be. Has the board as an entire body discussed this, or is this just a staff recommendation?
That's it, it's closed session.
I'm actually looking, I believe that's.
I just want to make sure that, we're not operating in a vacuum, they're going to totally surprise the village board, what happens to the planning commission thinking.
no, I don't think that this was operating in a vacuum. I mean, we've had multiple discussions about the fire station, and I do think my only concern really is the facade easement, and just our community really values this building, and in saying this, I think that in my mind that this is a somewhat separate issue, but this is really an important building in our community, and we've heard that loud and clear, and so I really value the look of the building, and I think the architect has done a good job preserving that, but I just want to make sure that we do have everything in a row, so we can move forward appropriately.
So is our vote then, is there thinking that our vote here tonight is premature because some of those ducks are not lined up in a row yet? Or, we don't want to come next month and look like, oh my God, what happened to the turret? It's not there. No.
Right.
Thank you. I just want to see if I can help steer the board back to the agenda item so we don't run into an issue of discussing a non-agenda item.
Yep.
That's all. The question really before the board, to put it another way, is whether the physical changes reflected on the attached drawings, in other words, removing the garage and adding that pedestrian walkway, whether those are consistent enough with the existing planned development district, consistent enough with that plan, that you would stamp them and say, yes, that they're appropriate and consistent with the existing plan, and we would approve that modification of removing the garage and the pedestrian, and adding the pedestrian walkway. That's the jurisdiction that this body has, and that's really the question. Bart, is there anything that I missed?
No, correct.
Commissioner.
Can I ask a question?
Hang on just a second, President Rosa, hang on.
And that plan calls for this building to be, okay? That plan calls for this building to be what? You're saying we're changing, not the building, we're, the fire station. If we weren't selling the land to the fire station, would this be before us anyway if we wanted to do these changes to the building? If we weren't selling it, would this be before us?
I think it's irrelevant who's doing it, because it's a change, it's just a change.
Right, so it would be before us, if it would, that's my question.
absolutely.
Yes, it'd be before us either way.
Right, right.
So if we weren't selling it and they came to us and said, hey, to properly put out fires, we need to make these changes to this building to modernize it, make it better, and we said, yes, I mean, it'd be the same thing, right?
Yeah, and you could say, okay, what was the original intent of the PPD? Was to have this municipal complex that included the fire station, the village hall, and the library with the health offices. Is this modification to help the police, or excuse me, the fire station do a better job of serving municipal residents? Is that consistent with that plan, yes or no?
Right, so I mean, common sense tells me at this point, it's a fire station, it's gonna be a fire station, the answer is yes. That's just the common sense test. But I understand the concerns when we're getting back to this facade thing, but you're saying that ultimately the facade, the board is gonna get to decide, no matter what, to Barbara's comment, are the turrets going away? That is going to happen, and there's no way around that.
Absolutely.
Well, no, the design review for the current building will decide that. The design decide what happens in the future. So if you adopt it first, then the design review board adheres to it. If you adopt it second, the design review board adopts the design, and then we make the design into the future.
Design review board is approving the current plan that's being presented to them, which is what the architect, and the easement is for what's going forward. The architect's plan is for what the board approved, and that's the design review board. Is that correct?
Correct, no changes will happen to the property until the facade easement is done and the sale is transferred, right? So the design review board is reviewing the plans that are currently developed, but if for some reason the plan commission or the village board wants additional or less modifications, it would need to go back to them, you know, with that. But the village board ultimately does have control over what remains or is modified to the building based on the approval of the facade easement and the conditions of the sale.
Okay, so, Dave, this question for you. Even if I share the same concerns about the building itself and how it looks, those are all different issues. For what we're deciding now is, that's a fire station, it's going to continue to be a fire station, so is this a change to?
Right, is this an appropriate change that is consistent with the development plan? Yes.
So, okay.
And for example, just one possibility, right? So currently the site functions as is with a driveway that allows cars to pass, you know, through the building into the parking lot. If for some reason that was seen as detrimental because traffic was going to be, you know, modified or whatnot, that would be where the plan commission would say, oh, the development plan no longer makes sense. We need another driveway in this location to preclude that. Currently, this driveway is only functioning for the parking of 2 village inspector vehicles. It's not a throughway. Some people take it, but it's not. My office is right there. People don't do that regularly, right? So the plan commission's role would be to review whether or not that change is substantial enough to warrant additional considerations elsewhere on the site, or whether or not the removal of that garage is problematic in terms of how the site functions. You know, if for some reason they were storing things in that garage that now couldn't be stored in there, to be on the site and go, oh, we actually want to keep the garage. I don't think anything that's been presented here poses a huge change to the site. The application indicates the proposed use is a fire station, so the use is not changing. The application indicates that very clearly. The only 3 changes that have been presented are modification of this driveway into a pedestrian area Once again, the removal of the garage and the addition of the apparatus bay at the back to allow for the vehicles to be parked in there. So
I have a legal question.
Hold on one second, are you,
that's it, yep.
okay, go ahead, President.
Okay, for this information, and because I'm on both boards, because the zoning change, well, because this is so screwed up, and it's going to 5 different boards, I confused them what I need to vote on. So when we decided, did we want to sell the land, I was very hesitant, and I want it on the record somewhere, that I didn't want to sell the land, I wanted to lease the land, and the reason was because there's value in the future of those land if we don't have much of it, and we're poor. And we're also, the only way to not pay taxes is one day we may want to sell pieces of our land. That's just telling us, not popular, but that's an option. So if you sell land, you try to get the value for it. We're in the fire station right now, and so we have appraisals and we do institutional constitutional value. With my understanding that we'll have a conversation about rezoning it to institutional. That happens, outside of the, body, which is a private, internal conversation, and those things are brought in front of us, the village attorney, a plan development amendment. I feel that I'm objecting to the zoning change. I know it's just an amendment, but there's nowhere, maybe it's the fact that it's a land sale, but I don't want to do that. I was hoping that there was somewhere in the process that we could talk about what the zoning is going to be. And the reason I say that is, what to protect this building is and to protect our investment, our value of land as a village asset. It's not my own, it's the people that live here. The one way to do that is to do a facade easement. But the other way is to zone it institutional. That's another mechanism that would require the public understanding of someone coming forward and saying we want to change the zone back to mixed use. It's very understandable. So it's more, I guess you want to say, public perception, and I get that, but there's value in that, just like there's value in the facade easement. So if we're just going to have, well, now all we get to decide today as Prime Minister is this garage acceptable? Then do I have to vote yes? Then the only no I get to vote for zoning is on the land sale? Is that correct, Mr. Chair? Is this plan commission in charge of zoning?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
So I'm assuming because it doesn't come to the board, that plan commission is the proper body to consider what is the best zoning. And if I think the best zoning is, for many reasons, is institutional, can I vote no today?
Well, I would.
Because the garage, it's just supposed to come the garage and the planting.
Well, President Rosick, I would never presume to tell any official how to vote. Certainly, I think you make a point that there might be more than one reason to vote yes or more than one reason to vote no. So obviously, we all understand what the effect of a yes or a no vote is, and obviously, I'm sure you'll vote your conscience on whatever you think is absolutely the best for the village.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Carpenter, did the board discuss the various options for zoning this property?
No.
Up till they have discussed it? What was the pros and cons? Or
No.
They said that was planning commission.
And whose role would it be to introduce the request for a zoning change? For this parcel of land?
I think we're getting a little off.
We are.
I think we're getting way off the agenda item, and we can run into issues there if we're making decisions. I mean, I think, I would hate for anyone to come back and say, well, the Plan Commission discussed potential zoning changes, and I live down the street or across the street, and that change might affect me and my property, and I didn't have notice that was going to be discussed. So, I mean, I think the best thing for the board to do is, or excuse me, the commission to do is to evaluate the agenda item before it, to evaluate whether the physical changes to the property here, being removing the garage and pedestrian walkway, are consistent with the existing land development district that the property is already located in.
Okay, and then does the board have the ability, if it sees fit, that they'd rather this was zoned something else? I mean, I can kind of see how we went down this path, but if we say, sure, fire station, you know, we're okay with it, but the board says, hey, in all this dialogue of selling, facade, go down the list, we'd rather see this rezoned, is that something the board can say as a condition they'd like to go back and have done? Or once we do this, is that ship sailing?
You get them all in.
The village can amend its zoning pursuant to state statute and local ordinances as it sees appropriate, completely independent of any issue related to the sale of an individual property.
And that would be this process, correct? I mean,
Well,
It's a different process then, right? We would be sitting here today and Bart would be saying, hey, we're here, I mean, I'd have to read what he's saying. But I mean, it'd be something specific to rezoning. This is just,
Right, you
but they have, when will we supposed to decide that? I was just told the zoning goes to the planning commission, we discussed it there. Where else would we have talked about that? We talked about it during land sale, but there was no vote.
well, I think what Attorney Bear is saying is that we, as the board, would have that opportunity. So even if we approved this tonight, that we would have the opportunity to make a motion at full board to change the zoning for the property. Even, right?
to request the process to be
Right,
initiated,
yes,
correct?
Yeah, there's a process under the existing ordinances where there's a referral back to the planning commission to study, and then there's a recommendation. There's a whole process, but that is independent. There's not a hurry up kind of a thing where you need to do anything before or after. Oh, well, I sold the property before, so you can't rezone me. I mean, that's independent of the whole change of ownership process.
Once the property is owned by the fire department, if they decided it didn't make sense for them to have a station at this location, doesn't the village of Shorewood have like veto power over the property, or, they can't sell it without the village is okay? Because I remember that kind of discussions,
That's a whole different agreement that.
Right.
Okay, that's actually our agreement for the North Shore
So
Fire
it's not like
Department.
we're totally not having any control of the building in the future. I mean, it's not going to turn into, a great craft brewery restaurant.
Before any of that discussion, we would need to cover, I would think, which would be a more fundamental issue, which is, I don't believe that, at least with the expressed intent of our current village board, that they would desire to not have the fire department in this location. And pursuant to our agreement that we have with the North Shore Fire Department, our community would need to agree to not have a station in its community.
In the community, right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, as a commissioner, we don't want to approve something that staff has said, yeah, we're all for this, and the majority of the village board, is going to be like, what on earth did they do this? It's not what we wanted. So that's why we're asking, we'll have the board discuss this and, what's their intention? What do they want to see? Not that we have to go along with what the board wants, but.
I do think that some consensus is important. I don't think that it has to be, 100% consensus. And, I do feel like there are, in my opinion, some safe holds to, if we were to approve this, if something were to change down the road, that the board would have the opportunity to make those changes if need be. I won't talk about the easement anymore because that's not what we're agenda for, so.
But I mean, it's
I'll hold that
different than
comment.
when the Loudby's project was done and you were starting, a project, development from ground up. Here we've got something that is already there. It's being changed a little bit on the outside, remodeled on the inside. So as far as zoning, it's like, it'd be nice to know what's the intention of the board, because you guys have puzzled with this for more than a year.
Yes,
So you're privy to conversations that we know nothing about.
right,
I mean, I also do think that there would be some consensus for looking to what the staff recommends and what our attorney recommends. So, I use their expertise regularly, and that I do think is some of the sentiment, would be some of the sentiment from some of the other board members is, what is the recommendation from staff and from attorney here. So,
And do we have to approve the zoning before we can approve the survey? Ma'am?
this,
It's agended that way, it made sense to me when we put the agenda together, that was approved first, that when you knew what the CSM was doing, you knew what the zoning said. So when you modify, if you were to modify the development plan to allow those things, you would know that when you approve the CSM, what you're basing that off of. So to me, it made sense to confirm the zoning first and then verify that the CSM matched what the zoning intent was, rather than changing the parcel and then having to review the zoning.
Yeah, because without a presentation on a different kind of zoning, this would be beneficial, this is like option B would be beneficial, it's pretty hard for us to consider what the zoning is that was just before.
Let me reconfirm this because that can be slow sometimes. So let's say we approve this and the board says, that was stupid, we need to get this rezoned. The board can go to staff and say, hey, we want to investigate this, and that may be back in front of us again at some point, correct?
Or put in, a trustee or a president can make a motion, something second, and you put it on future agenda, correct?
Okay.
Staff already has said, I told that, and they had to bring it forward, so that's fine.
Okay. So can I make a motion?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So I move to approve the amendment to the Plan Development District for the Village Municipal Complex specific. The fire station is non-substantial and in compliance with the requirements of 535-22A1 through 9.
I second.
we have a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
It was carried to
4-1.
okay, so it passed four.
Yes.
Or it passed 4-1?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
Oh, did President know that?
she voted nay.
I just want to make sure we got everybody.
I vote yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we are moving on to the discussion and recommendation of the certified survey map for the separation of a lot located at 3936 North Murray Avenue for the North Shore Fire Department property owner, Village of Shorewood.
So I can be as brief as possible here. So once again, the information's in your packet. The primary purpose of the CSM is that a separation of the fire station lot is being proposed in anticipation of the expected real estate transaction to sell the fire station to the North Shore Fire Department. The certified survey map and its survey requirements are in Chapter 470, Article 2. The proposed CSM was submitted to the village engineer and Walking County Register of Deeds for preliminary review, as well as staff. We've all made technical changes to the document, which is now in its final draft form, as indicated in your packet. Of note, an exhibit containing proposed easements has also been included for reference. The certified survey map will not be recorded until those easements which relate to access and utilities have been identified by the village attorney. This is just a discussion and recommendation to the board on whether or not the proposed lot split has any technical issues or problems in terms of how the site functions.
I'd like to make a motion. I would to recommend approval by the village board of certified survey map for the separation of a lot located at 3936 North Murray Avenue for the North Shore Fire Department, property owner Village of Shorewood, subject to approval to close on the real estate transaction between the village and the
Second.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So it's still listed as our property, correct? Those are shoulders,
Correct.
it's just dividing dividing our property within the PDD into two separate parcels or three, now three?
I'm sorry,
Dividing our, so it would just be dividing our property.
so it's dividing the village hall, and the fire station from one property to two.
So it would be Village Hall and Village Center and Library.
Well, so village center is its own parcel.
Okay.
Yeah, so this parcel is currently only village hall and,
Got it.
the fire station.
And then when we talked about the board, one of the questions from a board member was, the plantings, we don't have a budget, we don't have any budgetary line yet for those plantings. What happens if that doesn't, we don't budget for that? Is whose property is that ours, it's hers, right? I can't remember.
The property line would show that as the village property, correct?
So it's still our property.
Behind village hall, correct?
Right.
Either landscaped or not.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, you're talking, east.
Yes.
So you're talking, correct, President Rosa, you're talking at the space east of the Village Hall?
Whichever one, I'm that direction, sorry about that, and I'm a planner, but,
Closer to the lake.
The board is referring to, the board members.
Correct, that portion would remain on the village hall property, which is not being contemplated for sale.
So,
And is there any parking lot that's going to Motion Fire Code?
But it would still include the alleyway here, did we pave all that?
The alleyway would be on the village, or on the fire department's property.
I guess the landscaping work.
The landscaping that we're talking about is the space, like right back here, that's Village owned.
Directly into the back doors.
Right, so let me try to understand.
Sure.
The landscaping is part of the ask, right?
No.
For the approval tonight, or?
Yeah,
No. So that's the development plan shows us a pedestrianized alley up here. That landscaping, I believe, will go forward in some fashion as part of the sale. The question is whether or not it will continue onto the village hall property to the east. And that will be a separate line item in the bid as to whether or not the board approves to spend money on that.
and so that continuous landscaping that is shown on the landscape map, if it goes ahead, the board approves it, the board would pay the portion that's on their property, the fire department pays for the portion that's on their property.
Correct, assuming that we have money in the budget for that. Yes.
It's the budget.
Otherwise, we can get a half circle there.
Right, right, yes.
All right.
Last one, there's easement included in the packet for the maintenance.
Sorry, President Rosa, can you say that again?
There's the easement in the packet, I was just using my phone, so I didn't see what my packet yet, but, is there an easement for maintenance access? It's recorded on that CSM?
It's not recorded or drafted yet. It's identified that there will be one, but the actual document is not included.
How does that work?
The board would need to approve that separately. The plan commission would not review the
I'm
easement.
like you're saying, so you take it to the plan commission, you say there will be an easement, and then you bring it to the board with the easement.
Correct. And this is just a recommendation to the board for approval, so the board has the final approval on all of those items. But per code,